Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Jeff Dannemiller, and I am with Amplify, and I want to welcome all of you to our fourth webinar in a series of webinars on core knowledge language arts from Amplify. Again, my name is Jeff Dannemiller. I'm a Director of Product Specialist at Amplify, and today we're going to just get right into it and introduce Amplify CKLA. Before we do that, though, just a couple of things. This will be about a 45-minute presentation of the program. But if you have questions and you're interested in asking those questions, you can type those questions into the chat panel, and we will respond to those questions either as the presentation is going. My colleagues Julia and Susan Lambert are on, and they will be responding to those as the webinar goes on, or at the end. If we kind of circle back to some of those questions, we will address those at that time. I want you to watch, though, for interactive polls throughout this presentation, because you will be participating. We want to get your responses and your feedback kind of as we go along, so that you kind of play along with us. All right. And we will keep some of those questions to the end. And I do want to let you know that we are recording this session, and this session will be posted so that you can revisit it or you can share it with your colleagues. Again, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know that many of you have probably attended all of the webinars in this series, which is really exciting. I kind of want to recap where we started. A few weeks ago, Dr. Carolyn Strom did a webinar on structured literacy approaches and nonverbal memory pathways to really boost reading success. And that title was From the Cortex to the Classroom. And that gave us a lot of great background on how the brain works as students learn to read. And then Robert Pondicio followed up with a webinar on the power of a knowledge-rich curriculum. And this was a fascinating webinar talking about the importance of building background knowledge and how that relates to students being able to read. His thesis was, reading is not a skill. It takes a lot of factors to become a great reader, and one of those obviously is building that background knowledge. And then most recently, Susan Lambert presented systematic phonics instruction, ensuring equity and early literacy, and really discussed, that learning to read is not a natural process. It's not something that just happens naturally, and it does require systematic phonics instruction. And those three webinars really culminate today in a presentation of Amplify CKLA, because the philosophical elements that were discussed in those previous webinars are all evident and represented in Amplify CKLA, and that's what we're really excited about today. So I want to start kind of with why districts turn to Amplify CKLA and the reasons for districts to choose CKLA. And one of those is their state assessment ELA scores are flatlining, or they're trending downward. Those schools that have been using a certain approach to teaching reading, a philosophical approach that they've implemented for a while, but they're finding now that it's not being reflected in positive scores. Scores are going down or they're flatlining, and schools are really looking at doing something different. That's one of the reasons why they look for CKLA. Another one is I work with a lot of schools like this that have an outstanding intervention program that gets students back up to speed and ramps them and filters them out back to grade level, which is fantastic. But what they're noticing is that every year more and more students are requiring that information, that intervention. And so that intervention is the result of gaps that are developing in early literacy instruction. Another reason is that schools are starting to get on the bandwagon of intentional knowledge development. There's a lot of buzz out there and a lot of talking about the research behind that intentional, coherent knowledge. CKLA, and they're excited about it, and they choose CKLA for that reason. And another one, and this is a big one, we're seeing this across the country. Schools see CKLA success in neighboring districts. the county over from them, or the district that's 50 miles away is starting to really produce great results with CKLA. And a lot of our CKLA adopters will go visit those schools and talk to those teachers and collaborate and learn about it, and then come back and say, we're ready to try this. We're excited about this. And that's really that's one of the great things about CKLA, is this grassroots word of mouth movement that's happening with the program. So we're really excited about that. Now, what is CKLA? Obviously, CKLA is a little bit of a different approach, but that different approach yields different results. And those results happen because of the integration of all of the skills in ELA: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. CKLA schools adopted with this holistic approach that every day students are going to be integrating all of those skills. This is not a program that requires a separate writing program or separate grammar program, separate spelling program. All of that is integrated in ELA and into CKLA. So, but before we get started and really dig into this, and we're going to do that today, hopefully you're all there. I see we have a lot of attendees, and I want you to be paying attention because your first poll question is coming up, but I have a confession to make. I always wanted to be a game show host. I became a teacher because it's a lot like being a game show host, but you have a captive audience every single day. But anytime I get in front of teachers, I like to play games. So today we're going to play GeoParody. Now, GeoParody is a game. Sorry about that music. GeoParody is a game very similar to Jeopardy. However, in Jeopardy, the questions matter a lot. In GeoParody, the categories matter a lot. So I want you all to pay close attention to today's categories, because I'm going to ask all of you to choose a category that you would like to start with questions about. Okay, so here are today's categories. Our first category is cooking. Next category, classic cinema. Next category, American history. Next category, molecular neuroscience. And finally, mythology. So those are your categories for GeoParody. What I want to do now is move to our first poll question, and I'm going to share this poll question. I'm going to launch this poll, and I want you to respond to it. Each of you choose a category where you would like to begin. I'm seeing those numbers mess around. This is kind of fun. Many of you have voted already. And I don't know if you guys can see the poll. I hope you can, because it is very interesting. We're getting close. Some of you are still voting. I see that cooking is in the lead with about 33 or 34%, 35% of people selecting cooking. I'm guessing that many of you selected cooking because you cook. You like to cook, you watch Food Network, you're interested in cooking. I can see that. More than a third of you selected cooking. I look at some of those other categories and I see that they are less represented. Classic cinema. We don't have a lot of classic cinema buffs here. And I always throw in molecular neuroscience because I want to see who would be willing to choose and answer questions about molecular neuroscience. And this time, again, as most times, it falls to the bottom of the list at 15% of you. Those 15% who are interested in molecular neuroscience, kudos to you. That's outstanding. But here's the idea. There's actual academic research behind why you choose the category that you choose. And this comes back to, I'm going to close my poll here. And this comes back to John Hatties' research. in visible learning and the science of how we learn. One thing that he says is that we are motivated by knowledge gaps, but we're put off by knowledge chasms. So those of you who selected cooking, for example, you're willing to risk a knowledge gap, and maybe that's even exciting for you to be able to answer a question related to cooking because you feel good about that. But another thing that Hattie says is in sheer learning power, prior knowledge effects are stronger than other variables likely to impact learning. In fact, prior knowledge effects readily outweigh effects due to IQ or so-called learning styles, which have a relatively weak effect on learning. So think about that. As teachers, many of us spend a lot of time trying to address learning styles in a classroom when if the focus were moved to prior knowledge, students would be more profoundly, positively impacted in academics. Now, if you watched Robert Pondicio's webinar recently, he quoted a lot of research from Dan Willingham. And Dan Willingham says this about prior knowledge. We tend to teach comprehension as a series of reading strategies that can be practiced and mastered. Unfortunately, it really doesn't work that way. The mainspring of comprehension is prior knowledge, the stuff that readers already know that enables them to create understanding as they read. Kids who score well on reading tests are ones who know a lot about the world. They have a lot of prior knowledge about a wide range of things. And so that whatever they are asked to read about on the test, they likely know something about this. Has this happened to you? You get your students all prepared for that state assessment, and then when you look at those reading passages on that state assessment, you find that students' knowledge of those reading passages really depends on their prior knowledge of that subject, of that content. That happens all the time. And that's one of the things that CKLA addresses. CKLA builds student knowledge within each grade level and takes a look at that student knowledge, and students build on prior learning and they apply that knowledge base and vocabulary to access new tech and new context in science and in social studies and in literature and in culture. And that knowledge builds within each grade level, and it creates this solid foundation of knowledge of the world and this intricate web of vocabulary that continually expands. Through this coherent design, students continue to expand their knowledge across grade levels. So the units are really, and what's great about them is they're diverse in time, they're diverse in culture, and powerfully, it's not watered down. It's rich, and it engages students with a wealth of information. And it's not arranged around themes in CKLA. The topics are actually domains of knowledge that students can master and engage with. By revisiting these topics then across grade levels and increasing depth, CKLA reinforces comprehension and deepens students' interests. And this, curiosity really fuels the engine that moves students forward. And this whole idea is really based on this foundational element that, every child deserves access to knowledge. Knowledge just sparks that curiosity and wonder and enables every child to discover the world. And knowledge development is at the center of Amplify CKLA, and it's supported, though, by a systematic approach to foundational skills that accelerate fluency. And this results in a program that helps teachers to make a real impact and a real difference in classrooms across the country. So that's what we're going to focus on today with this program, Amplify CKLA. Knowledge at the center, foundational skills to accelerate that fluency, and the results of what's happening with the program. Now, if we had to represent CKLA in one graphic, it would look like the one on your screen. And this is that Scarborough rope that Susan Lambert referred to in her earlier webinar. These are really all of those elemental skills that students need to become successful readers, that all of us need to become successful readers. That purple stuff at the top, those purple labeled words at the top, all deal with language comprehension. We all need background knowledge, but not just background knowledge, vocabulary that supports that background knowledge, sentences, and understanding how sentences are structured, and connections so we can make inferences. We can recognize cause and effect. We can recognize how elements of a paragraph come together and so that helps us to summarize and make sense of language. And that purple strand at the top, those language comprehension skills, all are initially taught discreetly, and students learn them discreetly. But as we all become better readers, those skills become more strategic. We employ those skills when necessary for specific aspects of comprehension. At the bottom, the green strand at the bottom is word recognition. And that green strand really has to do with that systematic phonics that Susan discussed in that last webinar. The concept that sounds are made up of letters and letters make up words. And those skills are, again, in kindergarten are taught discreetly, but those skills become more automatic as we all become better readers. And that K, 3, and 5 down there at the bottom really represent grade levels of CKLA and the way that these skills are taught in the progression. In kindergarten, these skills are taught discreetly. Students work with each one of these skills to learn about that and apply that to their reading. And then by grade 3, everything becomes integrated. And then that braid and that rope becomes even tighter by grade 5. That's really kind of the background and the basis of the program. So how does it actually work? This unique structure allows every student to develop foundational skills and build knowledge for deep comprehension. Grades K through 2 is where we're going to start. It features 2 separate instructional strands. There's a skills strand that constructs a solid base of foundational skills: systematic phonics instruction, reading, writing, grammar, spelling, handwriting. Every lesson of that skills strand covers all of those aspects and integrates those aspects. The knowledge strand helps to build background knowledge and immerses students in a daily interactive read aloud to build oral and written comprehension. And then as students grow up in CKLA, the program really grows up with them. At grades 3 through 5, students build reading and writing and speaking and listening proficiency through content-driven units with a real focus on close reading and critical thinking. So let's start with that K2 skills strand, okay? That K2 skills strand in CKLA employs a research-based approach to foundational skills that Susan touched on. It accelerates fluency. It's a different approach that yields different results. Now, in this skills strand, in this instructional time for the skills strand, you work with core components, and there are many components, but we're really going to look at those core components that you would utilize to teach this skill strand. There's a teacher guide for each one of the units that you follow, which follows every single lesson in each unit. And then students actually have an activity book where they're doing their writing and their thinking and their drawing and their spelling in that activity book. And then students also have for each one of the units a reader. And this reader, we'll look at these today, but it's 100% decodable, and it helps to reinforce those skills that are taught in that systematic phonics instruction. Now, this K2 skill strand is rooted in a very strong phonological awareness and phonemic awareness base that's going to extend into phonics, okay? By the end of kindergarten, students work with phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, and ultimately, they learn all of the basic code. So by the end of grade 2, they're taught all of the advanced code. This systematic sounds first approach builds and builds and builds to accelerate fluency. In other words, we like to say about CKLAs, we go slow to go fast. Students in kindergarten learn how to separate sounds and phonological awareness. They learn how to represent beginning and ending sounds with phonemic awareness and separate those sounds. And what does this instruction actually look like? Well, in that teacher guide for basic code and for advanced code, each lesson begins with an introduction of a sound spelling combination. Okay, this is not letter of the day instruction. Students focus on the sound, and then your teacher's guide gives you formative assessment opportunities to check progress. Students in this time, in this instructional time, will turn and talk, and they'll use gestures to represent sounds, and this reinforces that phonemic awareness. And then that's the that's the decoding part. And the encoding part is where students actually learn to write each sound. And they practice reading the sound then in the context of the decodable reader. And what's nice is that within each one of these lessons, in the teacher guide, you can also target instruction to each individual student need. And the teacher guide gives you suggestions for more help in reading and more help in spelling. But I'm going to talk about those readers for a second, okay? In K2, the student readers that the students use are phonetically controlled. They're decodable. So students engage in this text after they've been instructed in the code for that text. So this decodable code builds day to day, and students practice the story. CKLA student readers are written by successful children's authors, and they feature relevant stories, recurring and engaging characters, and exciting plots. They look like chapter books. So your kindergartners, your first graders, your second graders carry these readers with them, and they're reading chapter books. And they have tables of contents and indexes, so students learn text features as well. That builds across the chapters. And these character and plot, as I said, they develop, and the information builds, right? Now these texts are scaffolded completely across a year, and then scaffolded from one year to the next. Let me back up here. Scaffolded from one year to the next, so that it gives students access to grade level text that builds in complexity within a grade level and across grade levels. So that's the skill strand. If you think about that green part of that Scarborough rope, that's really what we're focused on in that skill strand, right? Now, at grades K through 2, this skill strand complements the knowledge strand. Now, in K2, this knowledge strand helps listening comprehension, and you use this listening environment to deliver these rich and complex text to students in a way that they couldn't decode it. And this helps to build that critical background knowledge. So, with that said, before we get into this knowledge strand, I have another poll question for you. Are you ready for your poll question? Here's your poll question. I want to see what you know. And this question is, at what age does reading comprehension catch up to listening comprehension? And I don't know what I'd say. At what age does reading comprehension catch up to? And I see many of you are voting. At what age does reading comprehension catch up to listening comprehension? And I see we have a variety of answers. 8, 11, 13, or 17. Many of you have voted. So far, I have 23% say 8, 38%, no, it's going up higher. 41% say 11, 31% say age 13, and 7% say age 17. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, but I want to give you the correct answer. Research shows that reading comprehension catches up to listening comprehension around the age of 13. So that 31% of you who selected age 13, good job. Give yourselves a pat on the back, because that's what it is. Now, why does that matter? Well, when you think about building knowledge, right? We're talking about building knowledge for students in grades K through 2. In CKLA, what that means is students build knowledge through listening comprehension, because they can listen on a much more sophisticated level than they can decode and read. So we take advantage of that. Now, how does that happen? For that strand, for that knowledge strand at grades K through 2, here are the core components that you're using. Again, there's a teacher guide for every unit, but now you have a flip book, and that flip book shows these amazingly beautiful visuals that you use to support the read alouds from each lesson. And then students are recording their answers and doing their comprehension work and their writing in their activity book. So these are the kind of the core components. But what does it actually look like? What does that day in the life lesson look like? Well, again, every lesson in the knowledge strand begins with a read aloud. You want to capitalize on students' listening comprehension to build that background knowledge. And so every lesson, you tell this story. And as you tell the story, you are listening for students' responses and listening for their comprehension, and you're building that comprehension as well. Now, at the beginning of every lesson, the first thing that happens is you're connecting students' knowledge of that day with something they did yesterday. We want to really carry that knowledge from one to the next. And then as students listen to that read aloud, there are opportunities for students to do all kinds of things. Okay, for example, this is an example from first grade. And this is one of those read alouds. This is in your teacher guide. Another astronomer named Galileo came after Copernicus, and he believed what Copernicus said about the Earth revolving around the sun. He invented telescopes that helped astronomers prove that Copernicus's theory was true. So think about your first graders. If they had to read that independently, would they be able to comprehend? Probably not. But if you are delivering this in a read aloud and you have this great visual of Copernicus behind you, they're following along. And then you ask those questions that help develop, for example, vocabulary, like what is a telescope? And students are talking about that. And said, and although Galileo did not invent the first telescope, he did invent many powerful telescopes that helped him and other astronomers make many important discoveries about space. So, and then this continues. As you read these read alouds, students have opportunities to collaborate with those great eyes to eyes, knees to knees strategies, students on the car collaborating and talking to one another, those turn and talk activities. There are literal comprehension questions as well as, inferential and evaluative comprehension questions that are dependent on that text and that story that you're telling them. Once that read aloud is complete, then students collaborate in groups or they work independently in writing, word work, vocabulary, comprehension, all kinds of things in that in those activity books as well. So that knowledge strand really takes those complex read alouds to help, again, build that background knowledge on those intentionally selected topics, building students' vocabulary, having that great text-based discussion, and ultimately, doing some writing as well. So let's recap at this point. In grades K through 2, that skill strand and the knowledge strand, these complement one another to deliver that comprehensive instruction in all areas of ELA. Now, in grades 3 through 5, students deepen that critical thinking with an integrated strand with those two integrated strands of skills and knowledge. So in grades 3 through 5, students build reading, writing, speaking, and listening proficiency through content-driven units with a real focus on close reading and critical thinking. Students build on that content knowledge from grades K through 2. They work with the same domains, science, social studies, literature, and culture. And this broad base of content knowledge has an extra benefit. Here's something really unique about this. The domains in CKLA, the content that students are working with, the knowledge that they're building in science, social studies, literature, and culture, they align with the topics that are most commonly found in reading passages on those high-stakes tests, kind of as I mentioned earlier, helping students prepare for the content that they're going to be faced with when they read those reading passages. So many lessons in grades K through 5 still begin with that read aloud, and we'll look at that. But first, understand what those components actually look like. In each unit, again, you have a teacher guide which helps you to deliver that instruction for each one of those lessons. Students now have a reader that follows the content of each one of those lessons, and then they have an activity book where they're recording and doing all of their comprehension work, all of their writing, and those activity books are unit specific. So for example, here, there's a teacher guide for the Middle Ages. Students have a reader that goes along with the Middle Ages, and understand those texts that they're reading in that reader are a mixture of informational text and fiction as well with every unit. So you get that nice balance. And then they have an activity book again for each one of those units. So what does it look like? Again, many lessons in 3.5 still might begin with a read aloud. And of course, at the beginning, you'll see there's an emphasis on connecting to what happened the day before or connecting to prior knowledge. But as they're released into those small group and independent reading, students build that knowledge and comprehension through literal, inferential, and evaluative questions. They learn how to identify literal, inferential, and evaluative questions so they understand what's being asked when they draw on that prior knowledge, when they look for evidence from the text. And they do that with each selection that they read. And then those lessons in that activity book include activities for all areas of ELA, graphic organizers for comprehension, grammar usage and mechanics activities that are tied to the content that they just read, morphology, Latin roots, Greek roots, prefixes and suffixes, again, related to the content that they just read, and writing as well. And writing that takes place in CKLA, sure, there are extended writing pieces, but there's a lot of emphasis and focus placed on students being able to construct a paragraph and construct that paragraph in a logical manner with the topic sentence, with supporting details, evidence from the text, commentary on that text, and some kind of a concluding sentence or transition. That is a huge part of CKLA in that writing process, helping students to write a well-constructed paragraph. And of course, right there in those activity books are rubrics that go along with that writing. So again, this program at 3.5, as you can see, really grows up with the students. And another way that happens is by including a grade level. In grade 3, for example, there's one whole unit where students follow a Viking's journey. In 4th grade, Eureka Student Inventor is all about inventions in a game show type environment. And then, yes, you actually get to teach Shakespeare. In 5th grade, Unit 7 with A Midsummer Night's Dream, a unit that's supported by the Folger Shakespeare Library. Now, these quests, they're collaborative. They're problem-based, immersive learning experience. Students work in groups, and you kind of put aside that traditional pattern, instructional model for one unit, and you do something that's unique and fun, but it's still standards-based. It still allows students to work with language, to write, to develop all kinds of different speaking and listening activities, and it's still standards aligned and standards based. Now, questions always come up about assessment with this program, and I want you to know that, of course, at all grade levels, you have a variety of informal and formal assessment opportunities, including just daily informal checks that will be referenced right in your teacher's edition, as well as daily formative assessments. So every day you'll have tools that you need to track student progress. There are, of course, at the unit level, mid-unit assessments as well as end-of-unit assessments. And then the program also includes benchmark and placement assessments. I want to look at those unit and mid-unit assessments because I think they're kind of unique. And the one I'm looking at here is from a grade 3 unit. And what's happening here in this unit is midway through the unit, students take an assessment. And that assessment will include comprehension. Notice they read a cold reading passage and they respond in writing, and they respond in graphic organizers. It will also include the grammar and morphology that they've covered in the individual lessons leading up to that mid-unit assessment. Students also, and this is really what makes this program unique, they're not just assessed on those aspects of ELA, but they're assessed on the content knowledge that's going to help them be successful when they get to those reading passages on those higher stakes tests. And also to support you in planning, all of your resources for CKLA are available online for quick reference. And what's great about this, teachers are using this to project everything for whole group instruction or even for small group instruction. All those beautiful images from those flip books can be projected online as you deliver those read alouds. Webinars that you've had, hopefully what you've seen here is all of that philosophy represented in one program. It's really what high quality curriculum looks like. It's an intentional domain-based unit structure that's supported by those systematic foundational skills to really help level the playing field and close those knowledge gaps before they become knowledge chasms and set students on a path to academic success. And what's interesting is this approach of Amplify CKLA has been recognized for results. In fact, Ed Reports, an independent evaluation agency, gave CKLA its highest marks in building knowledge, in usability, and in text quality on the first pass. And even more excitingly, schools across the country are seeing dramatic impact that CKLA is really making on their students. CKLA students are reading more high quality texts. They're discussing academic topics in depth and detail, and they're outscoring their counterparts on high stakes tests. These results really speak for themselves, but more importantly, Amplify CKLA teachers are a part of a community. And before we get into that CKLA community, I have another poll question for you, okay? Because we want you to become a part of that CKLA community, but we just have to know how to reach you. So here's your question. What is your preferred social media outlet? And I'm going to launch this poll. What is your preferred social media outlet? Facebook, Twitter, other, or I'm not a social media user? Look at this. Seems like we got a lot of Facebook users jumping out quick. You're probably checking Facebook right now or Twitter. We got most people voting, which is great. 46% it looks like or so are 45% Facebook users, 16% Twitter, 18% use something else, and 21%, there's still a lot of you out there that say, I'm not a social media user. Well, great about CKLA is that CKLA teachers are leveraging social media to develop their community. And so if you are a Twitter user, the 16% of you out there who are, search hashtag CKLA and you will see what's happening in classrooms across the country. And it's so exciting to see this. Something like, we finished Jack and the Beanstalk today, and the Think or Share question of the day was, do you think Jack should have taken the Giants things? Would you make the same choices? And her students, and you can see right there in that picture that they're doing that eyes to eyes, knees to knees strategies, and they're sharing those ideas. This teacher is showing, her colonial townspeople activities that her students did as a culmination of the colonial townspeople unit. One of the favorites from first grade is at the end of the fairy tale unit is this magic royal tea party. And this teacher shared all of her pictures from her magic royal tea party. And you can see all the students having a whole lot of fun dressed up at their tea party. And this teacher shared their glue lines that their students made as a part of a science unit from CKLA. So teachers across the country are sharing their experiences with CKLA. If you are a Facebook person, those 45% of you out there, there is an Amplify CKLA Core Knowledge Language Arts user group on Facebook. And this is a great place to see teachers come together and collaborate. We get a lot of messages from teachers on there saying, I'm just starting with CKLA. I'd really like some help. Can you help me make sense of this? And the other CKLA teachers in the community jump in immediately and show pictures of their classrooms and give them tips and tricks and hints on how to make this program as successful as possible. And that's what's great about CKLA is it's this community of teachers who support one another, who encourage one another, who understand the value and the results that they're getting and want to share that with other people. And this group of people, all of you CKLA teachers out there, are really, the motor behind the success that's happening with this program. And we are so excited about that. So with that said, I want to come back here to CKLA again as a program with knowledge at the center. Hopefully you've seen that today. Students building that knowledge intentionally from within a grade level and across grade levels, supported by that strong, systematic, foundational skills instruction, especially at grades K2 with that skills strand to help accelerate fluency, to help close those gaps, to help stop that flood of students that need intervention. And it is a program that's recognized for results. And teachers are seeing that in their classrooms every day and sharing those results. Schools are seeing that and sharing their results. And even outside agencies like Ed Reports are seeing that and sharing their results as well. So with that said, I will turn it to the very last poll question because I want to take a little time to see if you are interested in a sample of CKLA. So I'm going to launch the last poll question. Are you interested in seeing a sample of CKLA? If you are, say yes, I'm interested in seeing a sample. And if you say no, I don't need a sample at this time, maybe you're already using CKLA, so maybe you don't need a sample. But we will be happy to send you samples. It looks like many are interested in samples. Really excited about that. Okay, it looks like most people have voted. I don't want to close the poll. I'm going to leave it open for a little while longer. Lots of people, 2/3 of you, 66%, interested in samples. Well, we will make sure. One thing that we have developed for Amplify CKLA is what we call an experience kit. And essentially what that is a week in a box. So it takes 1 week of CKLA and gives you all of the components that you need to teach that week. Your student readers, activity books, your teacher guide, and any other component that you would need to teach for that week. So you can try that out and see how your students respond, see how you like it as well. So that's one thing that we can make sure to get out to you if you're interested in the sample. So with that said, I will open up this time for questions as well. So do you have any questions? And I'll open it up also to Julia, Susan, if there's anything that you want to add at this point.
Hi, Jeff. I'm seeing a question from Valerie. How do you deal with students who do not have prior grade experience with CKLA? What supports are available?
I missed that. Can you repeat that question?
Sure. How do you deal with students who do not have prior grade experience with CKLA? What supports are available?
What supports are available for students who don't have the prior grade experience? So if I'm hearing this right, it would be, and Susan, you can help me with this. If I'm hearing this right, it would be, say, a third grader who is coming into third grade with, and they haven't used CKLA in grades K through 2. Is that what I understand?
I think so.
Okay, you think so? Okay. Susan, do you want to chime in on this? Because there's all kinds of different ways, but.
Yeah, I would love to. I'll give you a break from talking for a little bit. Hi, everyone. I like to say one thing about CKLA, especially when we start talking about like the knowledge sequences, they're really almost little mini units in and of themselves. So when a student, let's say a student comes in halfway through the year and doesn't get that, even the prior third year experience, the knowledge that they're going to gain within that unit itself is just really comprehensive in and of itself. So they will benefit from that knowledge just being exposed to that particular unit. But the also really nice thing about what CKLA does in terms of student interaction is that peers are working with peers. And so not only is the teacher going to, at the beginning of the unit, sort of set up, this is the connections that you would have learned in a previous grade, or do you remember this from other grades? But they're also going to engage students in that process throughout the unit. And so students help their peers sort of catch up and learn from it. And then from that, I would say, it's sort of like any other program where, you enter a program not having the prior experience. There's often some program effects and some change involved in that. But the one thing I love about CKLA is that no matter where you enter the program, because of the way the units are structured, you're going to benefit from that knowledge all the way around.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, Susan. Julia?
This next question is from Destiny. With the third grade curriculum, how much of the writing is focused on multi-paragraph writing? That is a huge piece of the third grade writing standards and on the third grade state tests.
I'm going to answer that because I was a former third grade teacher, and so I know third grade really well, and I know what kids don't have and what kids need to have by the time they leave third grade. So what I love about CKLA is that it does a little bit of both. So oftentimes when kids get to third grade, they're still struggling to develop a paragraph and make sense of a paragraph, as well as how to put then paragraphs together. And so if they've come through the K1 and 2 program, they will have had exposure to every single text type and some really, really supported scaffold and writing experiences on how to put the different text types together and continue to practice that in third grade. And so there are a lot of opportunities within the program to do that and to extend if you feel like your students need more. So you'll see in pausing points and in end of units that there's lots of suggestions to be able to give your kids extra practice if they need it. But we really pay attention to learning, for kids learning how to do that well and deep instead of like doing it often. So sometimes in writing, I say teachers make the mistake of giving kids lots and lots of writing activities and miss out on writing instruction. And I really believe CKLA scaffolds kids really, really well to be successful in those writing, high stakes writing assessments.
That's great.
Great. The next question is from Michelle. How challenging is the material for 3rd to 5th graders who are strong readers? If there's a lot of read aloud, is it geared towards struggling readers and ELL students?
So I would say that, so first of all, there are supports to help with struggling readers. There are supports to help with ELL students, but there's also lots and lots of opportunities for students that are really, really strong readers. The nice thing about CKLA is it's really, really easy to supplement and extend kids that are performing at the high end of the grade level. So what we encourage is, instead of moving kids forward in the content, you actually deepen their content. So by the time you get to grades 4 and 5, you're not getting a read aloud every single day. A read aloud is part of the cadence of what we do, but there's opportunities to build in independence. If students make it through sort of that particular chapter, again, my suggestion is always to find paired texts that will actually help them understand the content more deeply, or again, use those ideas in the teacher guide for pausing points or extension activities to help them go deeper into the content as opposed to moving forward. So we often get questions about that prior to people purchasing the program, and once they purchase the program, they realize, wow, it's just it naturally differentiates itself because the kids get so interested in these topics.
Great. I'm seeing a question from Susan about the results that Jeff shared. How many years of using the program does it take to see the increased test results you shared?
That's an interesting question. Can I start there, Susan, with that?
Yeah.
You can jump in. You've seen it over time. Here's what's interesting. Schools are documenting and posting results improvement in the very first year. especially in kindergarten. And I think that has a lot to do with the systematic foundational skills that that are a part of the program. Year over year, the first place where schools are going to see those results is usually in kindergarten, because of the implementation of that systematic foundational skills approach. And then year over year, the results just get better. Has that been your experience, Susan? That's what I've seen. But
yeah, I mean, we've seen, just like you said, we've seen from the field, even K1 and 2, immediately people are saying, wow, I see a difference already in the way our students are developing as confident readers, and in the kind of vocabulary our students are using. As well as in grade 3, 4, and 5, teachers will say, wow, all of a sudden I understand what rigorous instruction is supposed to look like and how to connect it together, right? With reading and writing and speaking and listening all together, sort of the way that it's supposed to be fit together for students.
yeah.
Great. The next question is from Joanne. Can CKLA be used as an intervention program?
You want me to take that, Jeff?
Sure. You can start there.
And then you can add on if you'd like to add on.
Yeah.
This is a great extension of the last question, because number one, we have intervention pieces that can be used when kids need more time in learning. I think one of the biggest things about CKLA is that all of a sudden we're seeing sort of that response to intervention triangle sort of flip right side again. So what I mean by that is you should see the majority of your students, if your core instruction is strong, you should see the majority of your students able to be in grade level instruction. When you get the flip to that, where the majority of your students are actually in intervention, either a tier 2 or a tier 3, you have a core instructional issue. So what CKLA does is flip that triangle right side and then gives you tools through things like supports within the teacher guide, an assessment and remediation guide that provides extra practice for kids that need extra practice, pausing points that are built into the program at a regular cadence to ensure that you are double checking to see how your students are progressing. So with all of those things, yes, you can be using CKLA in an intervention setting, but really we're really most proud of the fact that we're flipping the need for intervention on its head, if you will.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was. You said it a whole lot better than I did. But the real point of CKLA is to eliminate as much as possible for those students to continue with intervention. Supports built into the program students who need reinforcement skills. But the program is really designed to flip that side again. So most of your
Don't you love that about the program too, Jeff? Is it's built on a really structured scope and sequence. And so one thing that makes it great is we can be sure that from a systematic point of view, kindergartners are all getting exposure to that grade level information. And whether they need more repetition or not isn't the point. The point is we're giving them all what they need in kindergarten, coming back to those kids that need to have extra practice. But I think that's really what makes it powerful.
The next question is from Peter. Do all of the materials you need come with the program?
Yes. We make sure that when a school implements the program, our local salespeople who work with those individual districts will make sure that all of the components that you need to be successful come with that program. And one of the components is it's not just all about the print and digital materials. Another key component to the success of implementation of this program is professional development. And so when you adopt Amplify CKLA, we also work with you to develop an effective professional development plan to make sure that your teachers receive the instruction, training, and support that they need so this program is successful.
Great. The next question is from Evelyn. How does the science and social studies content align to science and social studies standards?
That's interesting. I work all over the country with schools all over the country. And of course, different states have different science and social studies standards, especially in terms of content. When teachers look at the units in CKLA, they see a relationship to some of the topics that are being taught in science and social studies. So they're seeing some relationship to their standards. But I always want to clarify with teachers that this is not a science program and this is not a social studies program. However, if it does match the content of those standards at that grade level, then using CKLA just gives you an extra benefit where students are getting even more exposure to the content that they need in science and social studies. But it's not designed as a science or social studies program. It's an ELA program.
And, Jeff, I'm going to extend on that too to say, in kindergarten through grade 5, our ELA standards really, we've got foundational skills. We have to teach those through the end of grade 5, but we really make a shift in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And that shift from foundational skills requires students to be in ELA standards engaging with science and social studies content. Right? So what CKLA does is help prepare them to be able to make that shift. And if we don't prepare them in K5, they won't be successful in grade 6.
Great.
So we have time for one more question. If we don't get to your question today, we will send the responses in a follow-up email. The next question is from Mary. Can you speak a little bit more about ELL supports, and is there an ELL program?
Susan, do you want to talk about our ELL supports? And I was waiting for you to jump in and talk about video and our ELL support.
I would love to do that. So CKLA is built on an ELL model in sort of 2 ways. The first way is we have what's called integrated ELL supports right in the core instruction. Those ELL supports there are at point of use in the lessons and in the teacher guide. And what they're intended to do is help students, ELL students, be successful and successfully scaffold towards the college and career readiness standards. The second way we handle ELL supports is through a program called Language Studio, and that's really a designated ELL time, meaning that students are in the core instruction and then they get additional instruction at another designated time to help them be successful in ELL standards. And that's all built around language proficiency. And so that's a companion program. You cannot use our Language Studio program without using CKLA in the regular classroom because it truly is a lesson-to-lesson extension of what's happening in the core instruction.
Great.
So those are all the questions we have time for today. Jeff, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'll take it away. Thank you. I can't thank all of you enough for joining us today, to learn more about Amplify CKLA. And Julia, I can't wait for the next webinar series. And so I hope we're working on something that's going to be even better than this. This was outstanding. This was a whole lot of fun. Thank you guys for your time, and have a great day.